I clicked. Sorry. Oh, we're live. Hi, Marty. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hey, Grace. Thank you so much.
So when I first heard about you guys was like I was visiting Tandem, like the YC collaborator co-working thing, and then people were saying it's a Zendesk old office, and then someone said like they're replaced by Pylon, so that's how I heard about Pylon for the first time. And then obviously you guys are very popular among like the customer support slash like the early stage startup community. So why don't we start with like, what were some core lessons that you've learned early on in your career that kind of shape you into who you are today?
Man, well, I think one thing that helped early on, so for some
Mhm.
context, I studied computer science and then went and had a software engineering job at Airbnb. And I
Mhm.
guess one of the lessons earlier on was that I did not really like my first job. I was there and it was a great company and like for some people, but it wasn't the company for me. It didn't feel very grindy. It felt like too big, frankly, and it was like hard to move and do stuff. And so I very early on, luckily figured out that what I was doing isn't what I wanted to continue doing, and so I had to find something else. So I guess the lesson there was, yeah, I didn't like what I was doing at the time.
I feel you. I wonder, so like I guess like when you first started the company, I think you guys started like a biotech or like cancer or like Alzheimer research company and then pivot into customer support. Why don't we talk about
Yeah.
like yeah, like how was that pivot kind of like look like back then?
Yeah, it was not linear. So when I left Airbnb, I wanted to start a company. I didn't really care what it was going to be. And actually, my co-founder at the time, who are not my current co-founders,
Mhm.
he had this idea for how to make essentially like some software to help people with Parkinson's disease
Mhm.
and better track and manage their condition. And
Mhm.
so I was, I was one of the co-founders of that company. It was called Onema Health. It didn't go anywhere,
Mhm.
but we spent a year working on that problem, and it was absolutely brutal. I did not have the original idea, nor did I know how to evaluate markets at the time, but
Mhm.
that was like the original thing. And again, at the time, I just wanted to start a company. It didn't really matter what. But a year in, I felt burnt out from one, the market. So, kind of being in health tech is really, really difficult. I think you have to have a lot of passion for it and patience, which I just didn't have at the time. And then two, it was learning for me that co-founders really matter. And specifically in that situation, it was kind of like someone who was a bit older than me and wasn't trying to build the same type of company where kind of like you kind of grind together in the same way and um, it wasn't like that romanticized idea of like a couple
Mhm.
founders in their and living together in like a house and trying
Mhm.
to make something happen. So yeah.
For sure. I wonder, so like, how do you find the current co-founders? I know one of them is from like Samsara, well, which we'll get into like the hiring and the product side of things. But yeah, so how do you like meet them? And then maybe if you can give the audience a little bit more about like, how do you kind of like, since like the first time the co-founder wasn't very successful, maybe if you could tell us like what not to do to like find a co-founder versus like what to do.
Yeah, so there are two sets of co-founders that I had before Advith and Robert. So the first one was this guy who was like an intro through a family friend, actually, who had this like idea for this app for Parkinson's disease. Um, I think that yeah, the learning there was you don't want to pick I like what to work on based on whether how compatible that person is with a specific idea. You want to
Mhm.
be able to work with them regardless of the idea. So
Mhm.
like most like it's extremely likely that you're going to have to pivot into something else.
Mhm.
And if you're tied to that specific idea or they only have expertise for that market, then that's not going to work out.
Mhm.
And that I would recommend anyone go straight to trying to pick the idea where or the co-founders that you could work on
Mhm.
any idea with and still enjoy it and
Mhm.
still want to work with them. So that was the biggest lesson there. And then also like for that specific co-founder, that was like a classic case of me being a technical co-founder at the time
Mhm.
and wanting to like find the business guy essentially who's
Mhm.
going to figure out the rest. And I think at least for our current co-founder setup with me, Advith, and Robert, actually all three of us we're all technical, and then we're all quite generalists. I think like any of us
Mhm.
could be doing sales or marketing, and we could have gone and figured it out ourselves. So yeah, lesson one was don't choose the business guy, choose someone you can
Mhm.
work, and don't choose someone based on a certain idea. And then the second co-founder I had, this was only for 6 months, so it was like really just like a short stint. It was a classic case of you choose someone who's still working somewhere full time, and you're hoping that you can convince them to leave. And that
Mhm.
unfortunately did not work out. So, 6 months in, he's still not down to leave his full time role. He was great. I would have loved to work with him too, but it just wasn't going to work long term. So,
For sure.
and then finally, I met Advith and Robert. I actually had known Advith for a long time. So first off, like they were already exploring ideas together. They had met at Caltech where they studied
Mhm.
CS together and were hackathon organizers. I was
Mhm.
also a hackathon organizer.
Mhm.
But yeah, they were already exploring ideas for like a year and a half. And then I had met Advith through the Kleiner Perkins Fellowship. So in 2017, there was essentially like summer internship program. I met him through that, and then we actually ended up living together for 3 years after.
Mhm. I have so many questions there. So like this may be in like the nitty-gritty of like hackathon or like building up the engineering network. Cause I wonder, so since you mentioned like you would meet them like at a hackathon, so obviously you know the person before, so it probably like the trust is a lot better. So first of all, like how do you even heard about the Kleiner Fellowship? Was it like big in every university or like was it something that you have to kind of like seek out?
Yeah, definitely. So I went to Purdue, and there were no Purdue
Oh,
KP
Midwest.
fellows.
Yeah.
Yeah, are you from the Midwest?
I no, I went to school in U of I, so, like,
Okay,
obviously, it's,
cool.
like, very close, like, the Big Ten area.
Yeah, no, for sure. So the Kleiner Perkins Fellowship was definitely up and coming at that point. So I don't
Mhm,
think it was extremely well known unless
mhm.
you were like kind of in SF internship
Yeah.
network and kind of like knew the coolest programs to be a part
Mhm,
of. So at the time, it was like the coolest thing
mhm,
that I knew of at least. It was probably like that and the Teal Fellowship maybe.
mhm,
And so KP Fellows I had heard of through kind of other hackathon organizers, and I actually had met one of the people running it at Major League Hacking's like
mhm,
hackathon organizer retreat that they did the probably in like 2016. And so I met Justin and Natalie, the two people who were running it at the time, at this retreat, and they basically were interested in, hey, like you should apply. And so I did. And yeah, I got in and was super excited about it. I knew like going into it that it was a really big deal. I like could not contain my excitement. And so it was honestly a life-changing program. And it had at the time, like the different alumni that have gone through it, actually it's been
mhm,
like louder now, but like Dylan Field, for example, from Figma was
mhm,
part of the first class.
mhm,
David from Retool was in it. The Persona founder, let's see, we had the OpenSea founder, so a bunch
mhm.
of really big companies that came out. And then, of
Yeah.
course, myself and Advith did the program in 2017, and the third co-founder, Robert, actually did it the year before. So
Mm.
all three of us kind of went through that like hackathon organizer to KP fellow pipeline.
Wait, I have a question for you about the hackathon community. So, like, for like, let's say if you're like building a program today to attract the like, the most cracked engineer from every university, like, do you think like recruiting the biggest like hackathon organizers would be the way to go? Or like how would you build up like a program or like some sort of like hackathon community based off like selecting these people? Like basically if you're building like the KP fellow today, like what would
Yeah.
you do to like track people like you?
Yeah, great question. I would definitely look at hackathon organizers.
Mhm,
I think like at least at the time so I wouldn't say that for cracked engineers necessarily. Like there were a lot of really great engineers, but I think the magic of that was that they were both engineers plus interest like had soft skills and were interested in
mhm,
organizing things. So I think it was a really good funnel for people who are looking for future founders because it's like,
mhm,
okay, these are kind of like not just
mhm,
technical people, but they also like building like and organizing events, and like
mhm,
that takes a certain type of personality. And so I think that actually lent itself really well to trying to recruit future founders
mhm,
for the fellows program at least.
mhm,
So today I don't know. I'm so like disconnected from the hackathon scene. I think the answer is yes. You probably would find a lot of really good people through hackathon organizers,
Mhm.
or just like attending hackathons and trying to see like who the good people are as you walk around.
Mhm. For sure. So I think your first customer was High Touch. Tejas was spoken on our conference, and the same as like the same with Samsara. So like, I wonder, like, how do you think about, I guess, like, first of all, like, I think going into mission control, because like back in time, in like when the first time I moved to Silicon Valley, like it was like the TO fellow slash like, Dave Fonda was there. There was like a bunch of like other super cracked like people like the Scale AI founder and stuff like that. But when I guess like now it's like the era, I think you're in like era number two now. Like I'm some of my friends who are living there are like the newer generation founders. So I guess like first of all, like how do you kind of like identify or like being a part of the right cohort? Because I think that kind of like helps a lot with, sales or like just like brainstorm stuff or like just attract talents. I guess like how do you put yourself in the position to be like engaging with other super, I guess like cracked founders?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, let me like walk this back. So it's crazy to think back on COVID times because that
Mhm,
like really threw a wrench in everything. I actually started trying after I left Airbnb, it was
mhm,
during the pandemic, and I actually left SF for a bit because
mhm,
so many people were leaving at the time. And so it felt like just like an empty city. And so I had left. I went to San Diego for a bit, then I went to LA for a bit,
mhm,
and like lived with a friend who was starting a company at the time. And I think if you want to build a company, you'll just naturally be attracted to other people who are building companies. And
mhm,
the thing is like when I went to LA, I was so bored. Like
mhm,
I wasn't meeting people who I had common interests with. And it sounds so stupid, but like I was so like I wanted to talk about company building. I wanted to talk
mhm.
about like really ambitious ideas. And people, that's not what people talk about in LA. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like no one has that interest. You kind of just have to talk about hobbies or something, which
Mhm.
like my main hobby was
Work.
trying to build a company and work. Yeah. And so even it's funny, like especially pre-pandemic, I know so many people were complaining about like, oh, like everyone in SF just talks about tech and startups and all this stuff. And some part of me was also like a little bit like, okay, that's all I've seen in my adult life. Like maybe it
Mhm,
would be nice to have some variety. But then during the pandemic, being away from that for a bit and like not having that or not being surrounded by that, you kind of feel this like relative difference and like the options of like, okay, would I rather
mhm,
be in a place where no one talks about it or in a place where like everyone talks about it? And for
mhm.
me, like it was pretty clear, actually, I do want to be in the environment where like people are extremely ambitious and they are like I'd rather be surrounded by those topics and conversations all the time.
For sure. But I feel like finding the right cohort is like also very different just because like you could go to any meetup in SF and then meet like fairly ambitious people, like everyone build all the time. But like I
Yep.
think finding the right people slash like the people who actually were able to like scale a company from scratch, like without like major life slash work experience, like I think that's like very key. So like how do you
Yeah.
actually even identify, let's call it like mission control is the way to go, or like even just like to build the relationship with, I guess, like people in the house to like move in and
Right.
stuff.
I think so it's actually funny for mission control, when I joined, it was actually falling apart as a
Mhm.
house. And so like it almost had completely shut down. And
Yeah.
actually, myself and one other person, Zach Kahn, were the two ones who like kept the house running. And
Mhm.
basically, people were about to leave, and because there was all this drama with like one of the residents, and yeah, we kind of kept it going. And so I think so to answer your like main question directly, I
Mhm.
think like one way to find people I'm learning is the best
Mhm.
people is to just um, get into programs that are selective,
Mhm.
or like do basically like go places where there's a high filter so that
Mhm.
like only the people who make it through the filter are going to be good. And so that could
Mhm.
be YC, that could be KP Fellows, it could be Mission Control now is super competitive. And so I guess those programs or those places kind of do the work for you. And
Mhm.
then if you have like no connections with people, I think and for example, if I were moving to SF for the first time, you'd have to do the harder thing, which is like go to random events and then just
Mhm.
like meet people and like hope you find someone good. But that's very hard. I think that's much harder than kind of meeting someone through some sort of like pre-organized program.
For sure.
The other thing I always like asking people is like, if I go to an event, I'll like go to the host and be like, hey, who do you think is like the person I would get along with best? And
Mhm.
then that will help like do the filtering for me so I don't waste a bunch of time and I potentially can find the person that is probably going to be most interesting to talk to.
For sure. I wanna start with, like, maybe we could talk about, building the product. So, like, I think when you first started, you talked to every day you would send, like, 40 emails on LinkedIn emails on LinkedIn to, like, talk to the customer support people. So why don't we talk about, like, who are the top customer support people that you're targeting? Were they, like, let's call it, like you mentioned, like, your target audience was, like, the company that with like 500 employee or so, like, it's not like the Fortune 500 yet, but like it's like kind of like the early slash mid market people. And when you find the customer support people, like, do you find customer support manager? Do you find like, people working in a specific industry? Did you have like any hypotheses to go after like the first batch of people that you want to serve? And then also, I personally don't feel like that's my like life ambition to serve like, like people's customer support tickets. Like, so how do you kind of like have the conviction for yourself to like move forward with something that's like kind of it's influential, but also like, it's not like we're, like, not talking
I
like
mean,
we're
it's
building.
B2B
Yeah,
SaaS.
exactly, it's B2B SaaS.
Yeah, I can start with the second part first. The motivation for Ad with Robert and I is 100% fun. Like, I feel
Mhm,
like there are much easier ways to make money. Like, it would be much easier to make money by going to Meta or Google and just like
mhm,
just grinding your way up the corporate ladder. Or I could have
mhm,
stayed at Airbnb and made a ton of money, and that would have been like a great way to spend
mhm,
for 10, 10 years or something. Um, so it really wasn't about money. It was about fun and adventure. And like part of like we had just romanticized this idea of starting a company so much where like you just like, whether it's from movies or whether it's from media or, talking to people, there's like something so exciting about building something from nothing and just like being with people you really like and just trying to like create something and like bring it into existence and make like a living breathing company
mhm,
with people and customers and revenue. So it just felt exciting and we couldn't stop ourselves from wanting to do it. So our
mhm.
motivation is really like more than any, it's not like, hey, we came in and we're like, we are the most passionate about customer support. That is like so exciting. I'm going to spend like 20 years of my life doing this. It definitely wasn't that.
Oh my god, I'm
And
so
then
shocked. I'm just kidding. No.
exactly, and so I actually sometimes I find people really inauthentic when they start talking about their B2B SaaS idea and they're talking about how passionate they are about the business, and I almost yeah, I mean, I definitely used to feel that there was like some sort of need to like tell some story about how you had the problem or whatever.
Mhm,
I think that's bullshit. I think that like if you're saying that in order to try to like convince investors or something, for example, to
mhm,
give you money or for people to join you, it's going to come off as really inauthentic if it's not the case. And I'm guessing in most cases, it's like that isn't like the big reason. So,
mhm,
um, yeah, for us, it was totally adventure and fun, and that's why we're doing this now. When it comes to customer support specifically, when we started the company, we said, hey, like let's set an end goal of what we want to achieve, and we told ourselves that we really want to build a $10 billion company in 7 to 10 years. Now, it's really hard to build a $10 billion company. $10 billion companies are like super rare. So imagine like if you look at public SaaS software companies that are B2B that are worth over $10 billion, there are only 26 of them. So very,
wow.
very few that have gotten to that size. So extremely rare. And if you look at them, almost all of them are horizontal SaaS companies or products, and meaning you can sell them to any company. So imagine like customer support, most companies need sales or marketing or like IT or payroll, most companies need. And so the markets for those markets for those products are just so big that you can get to that size. And so
Mhm,
we decided, okay, in order, if we want to build a $10 billion company, we should probably choose a horizontal category and then build within it. Now, within those different categories, we looked at Salesforce, the biggest SaaS company in
Mhm.
the world, and they're $300 billion company. They make the most revenue not off of their CRM, but their support system called Service Cloud. So we actually
Mm.
we looked at their revenue drivers. Service Cloud, their customer support tool, was their very biggest revenue driver, and they make $9 billion per year in revenue off of it versus 8.3 off of Sales Cloud, their CRM. And so yeah, basically we looked at that. We're like, okay, that seems like a really good market to go after. They're
Mhm.
literally making 9 billion in revenue per year off of it. Um, and then yeah, so looked at that market. Then we thought also the fastest growing companies were typically the ones who latch onto some sort of emerging trend. So
Mhm.
imagine if you find that the best example of this is like, let's say crypto. You find like a giant market. Crypto
Mhm.
is like within the money market and the financial system market. Okay, that's a pretty big market that exists. And then this new way of operating is coming up of Bitcoin. And you want to build a Bitcoin wallet for that emerging use case in that already giant market. And so you're
Mhm.
basically betting on the trend growing really quickly. So we were also looking for a trend within the customer support space. And what we would do is, as you mentioned, like message 40 people on LinkedIn every single day and
Mhm.
ask people with like support roles like, hey, we're exploring the support CS space. Like, do you have 15 minutes to chat? And we would just be asking for like them random questions. What do you care about? Like, what software do you use? What does your boss care about? What metrics are you measured on? Kind of like all these different things
Mhm.
to try to find some sort of new thing happening in their space. And so eventually we landed on this trend of a lot of people starting to support customers over shared Slack channels, Microsoft Teams, Discord, WhatsApp, these like new conversational channels.
Mhm.
And that was the trend that we thought was really exciting because it kind of breaks all of the existing tools that are built around this like concept of email, which looks a very certain way as a from, a to, a CC, a BCC, a subject, big structured threads versus like let's say a shared Slack channel that you have with a customer. There's no clear start or end. Their nicknames. There's not necessarily an email. Their reactions. Their short messages versus long,
Mhm.
and basically none of the existing tools could plug into them. So yeah, basically we saw this like omni-channel shift happening from B2B, and that was the trend that we ended up latching onto within this like broader market of customer support.
I wonder, I love that. So I feel like one part that um like I want to kind of like double click on is like when you are doing these like sales calls, like you mentioned that you would like this is like what you said on another podcast, like you mentioned that you would try to ask like a question at the end to be like, "Hey, if we're building this next Tuesday, like are you going to like how much are you willing to spend? Like are you going to spend like 10K or like what's a
Right.
whole vibe?" So when you're thinking like to build a $10 billion business within 7 to 10 years, like that converts to like, I don't know. I think that's like literally at some point you have to make like $1 billion per year or
Yeah.
something. So
Yeah.
like how do you justify that number to like action today? Like so how many customer have to pay like the 10K and then how many customers have to pay 5K that like grow together into 10K? You have to also bet on the right company that will like also grow, the cost of service would grow kind of thing. So how do you do the math in yourself mentally and then how do you like kind of like push that back to like the reality of today to like trying to land these like 40 customer support reps?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have basically our like target market
Mhm.
that we're going after and kind of the number of companies within each employee range size. And there's a clear need to go up market long term. Like basically,
Mhm.
if you want to become big, it's really good to capture up market if you can, because those are stickier customers that
Mhm.
will grow with you a lot over time. And so I don't have like well, I do technically actually have an exact number of like this many
Mhm.
companies of this employee range, et cetera. But what I'll say generally is like one, our initial market for even just like selling into B2B tech companies is quite large. Like it's in the like single digit billions. And then past that, what we can do is AI is kind of the savior for most companies when you're trying to like increase order of magnitude by one or two. And the thing is, like, the moment you have AI that is really, really useful, you can just really charge more, especially if you're replacing some sort of spend of. actual people. And so, like, if we can help people not scale their team as much, that's absolutely massive. Like, that will help reduce the cost of for the company, and people will be super excited to pay for it. If you can actually, you know, build a great product that can do that. So our goal is one, just build first off a great SaaS product that can house all of your data and all your workflows, and then layer in on top essentially like an AI layer to help that long term will start to act more agentically and, you know, replace the need to scale the team as much as you otherwise would have to.
I totally agree. I feel like, so when like let's talk about AI, right? So like I think one of the things is like you got started like, uh December 2022. And then I feel like back then AI was not like it was not like ChatGPT era yet, almost, but like it was like not very popularized. It was still like the end of crypto. And then I feel like that was like a point that people started talking about AI. But like I wonder,
Yeah.
so like when you first designed the product and then when you first pitched to your first like the seed investors, like obviously you got intros from the customer that already kind of like getting great tractions too. But I wonder, how do you kind of like think about AI back then versus now when it comes to building your own product? And then maybe we could talk about like the product itself on like the differentiation among like all these other customer support agents.
Yeah, definitely. So the timing is really crazy. We had the initial idea for Pylon, like this initial market wedge trend, one day, or actually, sorry, 7 days before ChatGPT came out.
Mhm,
So it was like, you know, the timing was really crazy. And
mhm,
ChatGPT comes out, we obviously think it's really exciting, and we had already been playing around with like GPT-3 and
mhm,
you know, the previous models, but it definitely felt like a step function change.
mhm,
And and then we like went into the next YC batch, and it was crazy. Like that was the first YC batch after ChatGPT came out. So like
mhm,
by far the most common idea was actually AI customer support. So
mhm,
so many people were building that company and building that idea. And out what we suspected was that the incumbent players in the market, so I think like Zendesk, Salesforce Service Cloud, Intercom, would be able to build their own AI
mhm,
really quickly. And that even if you built a really great standalone AI support agent, that they would be able to beat you in the distribution game because they just already own the relationships
mhm,
and the platform and all the data, and you would be always sitting on top of them and at risk.
mhm,
So our fear at the time was it's not a good business strategy long term if we want to build a $10 billion company because we are going to be at risk of the platform that we sit on.
mhm,
Now, I think now that there's more information about like the market, I still think that risk exists, but it
mhm,
is clear that there will be so many like niches of AI
mhm,
agents that you could build even within like all these categories. So for example, for like AI agents for customer support, I'm sure there will be some sort of like healthcare AI agent that is like better than you know, most than other AI agents that might be like more general purpose that like Zendesk might build or Service
mhm,
Cloud might build. And so I think there is like a massive market to go after that isn't necessarily defensible, but the market's so big that like
mhm,
it doesn't matter. And potentially you could just like build for like one part of it and still be massive. So
mhm,
I think it's like a not bad idea, but I do think it's inherently like less defensible and more
mhm,
risky than, for example, the strategy that we've taken, which is own the data and the workflows and then build AI on top. So the big difference between, yeah, like all these other AI agent companies and us is that they are an AI agent that plugs into an existing system of record. We are
mhm.
both the system of record and the AI agent, and yeah, I think that makes a more defensible business long term. And I also think it allows us to build a better product long term as well because we have no limitations on APIs or what we can actually do.
Mm. What is a build system record? Sorry,
What is
that's
what?
what is a building system like how what does it mean to build like a system record?
Yeah, so, you know, it's whatever product it's the platform that houses all the data and all the workflows, right? So, for example, if you're building a ticketing system like Zendesk, it means, hey, like when people email to your support at email, you have to be able to store that somewhere, right? And
Mhm.
like be able to have custom data around it and metadata that
Mm.
you create. So, for example, hey, this email that came in is priority one and it's for a tier one customer. And we have routing for this type of ticket that goes to, a support agent, or we have like teams of support agents built out into our platform, the system of record. So it's the place where you house all the data versus kind of like systems of like action or workflows, people are calling them these days, that are just maybe like a workflow layer on top of that. So it might
Mhm.
like read data from the system of record and then try to like action on it or make decisions.
Totally. So I know that like in your there's like two things in your function that's like very unique. One part is about, oh my god. So like basically it's like instant generating articles or like
Yep.
solutions based off your platform. So like basically if so and so asks you something, you can like quickly spin up like some sort of like solution article. So that will like kind of like fix a problem for a lot of more people. And then the other part that you guys recently did was like kind of instead of just like the per seat kind of pricing, it is like per, I guess, like per ticket or like some sort of like solution driven pricing. Maybe we could talk about like from the um maybe we first started with like how does the customer support industry currently working? Because I think everyone have probably emailed like support at blah blah blah.com in the past. Like, what is like the current incumbents are doing, and then how is like the process different by AI? Obviously, now you guys own the workflow, meaning I guess it's just like the data store on top of it. So, like for example, if I'm a customer of I don't know StreamYard, which is like this streaming platform, and then if I email the customer support, and then they kind of categorize me into a tier 1 to 5 or something, and then let's say
Right.
I'm tier 2, and then, like, they send me, like, article or link, I don't know, the next day instead of,
Right.
like, immediately yesterday or, like, 1 hour later or something. So, I guess, like, maybe if you could give us, like, the kind of, like, current process of, like, the traditional customer support system, and then to, how you are thinking about, like, kind of AI-fy that whole process.
Yeah, definitely. I think every part of the process long term will become AI driven,
Mhm,
but it will require time to get there, especially
mhm,
for our segment, which is B2B. So
mhm,
in B2B, okay, let's talk about like the difference right now. Let's say it's a consumer product, like the place that you're probably going to get the most support are either email or ticket forms or like call, or probably, or maybe
mhm,
chat as well. So those are
mhm,
the ways that you are going to get most of your customer support done and how you interface with the companies, the vendors that you as a consumer use.
mhm,
When it comes to B2B, the emerging trend in like next generation of companies is starting to move a lot of their support to more conversational channels. So, for example, that's the shared Slack channels or Microsoft Teams or Discord or WhatsApp or Telegram. And what that looks like in practice is let's say we at Pylon use Slack internally and our customer, um, let's say Linear uses us as they use us and they want support from us. So instead of them just like emailing support at use Pylon, what instead we've done is we've created a shared Slack channel where they can add in their team members that are
mhm,
relevant to using the product. And then we add in our team members into that channel. And then all the conversations about support or like getting them set up happen there rather than email. And it's much more convenient for them because that's where their team lives and works versus email they're not really checking as much. And so
mhm,
it's just like nicer to meet the customer where they are.
mhm,
And so if people internally have moved their communication to a new channel, then it would make sense that the you would want your external communication to also now be in that same channel as well. And so it's almost like this move away from email for kind of B2B, both internal and external communication to these new channels. So the old ticketing systems don't plug into these new channels at all. So if you use Service Cloud or Zendesk or Intercom, like you can't actually track conversations that are happening in a shared Slack channel or
mhm.
Microsoft Teams or Discord, but we can. So if you're operating in this new way, we are uniquely like one of the only ways to actually track these messages.
Mhm. I love that. So I wonder for like so basically like you onboard everybody through Slack, and then I feel like um another like question is like I guess like when you're using your own team to power other like customer support, like how much of it is like human and how much of like it is like replicatable from the technology standpoint for like each different company?
Is the question like how much AI do we use internally from our own product, or what? Can you
Yeah,
elaborate?
so, like, basically, like, you mentioned that, like, there will be, like, team members from Pylon to, like, merge into, like, a Slack group with people. So how
Right.
many let's say if there's, like, 3 people being onboarded with, like, Linear or something, and then, like, it's the same 3 people gonna be onboarded with, like, 5 other different companies, or, like, how demanding it is to, like, have the human component in this, like, journey of,
Yeah.
onboarding people into the system.
Um, So, okay, a couple things here. So, one, to clarify, like how we do this Slack channel thing,
Mhm.
so we'll make, at least in our case, these, and this is like the case for many of our customers, frankly, is you actually start leveraging these shared Slack channels or Teams channels, excuse me, for both the sales process and the post sales process. So, we'll actually
Mhm.
make these channels like the AEs and salespeople on our team, they will create a new shared Slack channel for a prospect. And so, actually,
Mhm.
during the trial period, our AEs will help our customer. So, let's say Linear is a customer, they are. And we give them the shared Slack channel during the POC process and then help them get onboarded and started there. And then as they are onboarding, they ask questions in the channel. Now, after the deal is closed, they will be assigned a CSM. And depending on how big the customer is, that CSM might either join the shared Slack channel or they might just live out a pylon and will have automated routing that'll route their conversations to the right support or CS person on our team based on what they're asking about. So we have all sorts of AI routing that's built in to say, hey, like if their message comes in and it's about pricing, then auto route to the CSM. Or if it's about this new feature, auto route to the CSM. Otherwise, route to the support team member. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question directly, but we
Mhm.
once the deal is actually closed and the Slack channel continues to exist, at least in our case, the messages that come in, we have a bunch of routing rules that make sure that we automatically route
Mhm.
to the right team member on our side. And in some cases, actually, the support team isn't even in the channels, and they're
Mhm.
actually just responding out of Pylon directly. So they
Mhm.
might be we at this point have like 1,500 shared Slack channels with prospects and
Mhm.
customers, and our support team directly isn't in a single one of them. Our CSMs, depending on which account it is, will be in some of the channels.
For sure. Okay, so I wanna maybe like we go back to a little bit about like the business side of things. So like one thing that I heard from like multiple different podcasts or media is like you guys close around within like 14 days and then like close the first investor within like 6 days or something. So like maybe like I think one of the strategy that you share is like asking the customers to like advocate for you. And then and then that goes back to getting the first customer, which is like you mentioned like you got someone like the high touch founder, and then both of your co-founder each got someone from I guess like their direct network as well. So maybe we could talk about like the entire fundraising strategy as a whole. Like when you were sitting down, like, it was like, 10 days or something before ChatGPT exists, like, what were you guys doing on the Excel sheet? Like, who would you list? And then how do you like kind of find the first point of connection to the right investors?
Yeah, so I think we're quite good at fundraising now, and actually,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
I can't say it directly, but there is good news coming up in the next couple of weeks for
Congrats.
on that front. So excited to share more on that in like the next 2 weeks. Um, So, okay, fundraising. I think that each phase, each stage of fundraising is very different. So, like if you're
Mhm,
trying to get like a pre-seed versus seed round versus Series A versus Series B,
mhm,
totally different ways of thinking about them. So,
mhm,
first off, like I think the so I can start with like early stage. Early stage, if you're like trying to get into an accelerator or pre-seed or seed, whatever, um, there it's mostly going to be about team and like social proof. Honestly, like it's ideal if you have customers and pricing, and like that will help. That will help a lot. But if you also have social proof, like a lot of the investors I know who are making bets at that stage want to know that you are kind of like verified by other people, because there's usually going to be a lot less progress to show. Like you're literally like, YC interviews you for 10 minutes, and like they're just
Mhm.
trying to make like a team bet. And so it's less of the idea, because most people don't have that much traction at that point. So yeah, early stage, it's going to be very much like team bet. If you have social proof, that helps a ton. And then if you have no social proof and no like, impressive like logos on your resume, then it will have to be all on the product in progress. So you may have to like make more progress there in order to, be as impressive as other people, where
Mhm.
there's more proof people can go off of. So
Mhm.
the yeah, so early stage, very much team bet, ideal if you have like product and market traction as well, that you can show. Then as you go later and later, what's going to happen is it's going to be more about actuals versus like forecasts, essentially. So instead,
Mhm.
like at Series A, now you need to have, a decent amount of revenue. And so,
Mhm.
for example, like I think the minimum benchmark is usually like, okay, you need to be like around 1 million in ARR if you were building
Mhm.
like a traditional like B2B software company.
Mhm.
And so at that point, then investors are, will probably start getting interested, especially if they hear good things from other people who use your product. And they'll come to you and try to get more information from you. And then the next thing, even if you have like good revenue, good traction, good team, the biggest like problem I see for companies is that it'll be unclear how their product becomes big long term, and how like the thing I talked about in the beginning of like, okay, they're only 26 $10 billion plus public SaaS companies, like that is, you have to start explaining to investors and to yourself, frankly, depending on what your goals are, like, is it even realistic to dream that big and to build a
Mhm.
company of that size? Because in most cases, and there are like so many great founders I know, like from YC or just who are friends, who are just building things that are just like are capped like market wise. And so I think like at Series A, especially, that's going to start to become more of a question of like, will you be able to break out? And just to give people a sense, like, even if you can get to 100 million in revenue, that's not enough. Like for a top tier investor, like you
Mhm.
have to get
Mhm.
to 1 billion in revenue. Otherwise, it's too small of an opportunity, because they're trying to find the next Airbnb that's worth $100 billion, right? And
Mhm.
so your $100 million market that you're going after is simply just not big enough.
Mhm.
So yeah, the earlier stage is going to be like more team bet and like, some early traction. If you have it, then it's going to start to become more about, okay, actuals versus forecasts and dreams. So it's going to be, hey, do you have like traction? Is your team good? Does it look like you're in a really big market? And then Series B is just going to continue to go in that direction, where, okay, now you're like early growth stage, and it's going to be very much about like, how do you scale the current thing, and can the current thing scale to a really big revenue size
Mhm.
and market size?
I wonder, so like in terms of like scaling the company, um, how like I just saw your recent post is like, you guys were like 13 people, now you guys have 41 people. How do you think about hiring versus AI? Um, like, because I feel like nowadays, like people always talk about like use AI as much as you can. And then there's like, when I just like did like a dinner for like, there's like a lot of YC founders who came to our dinner. Everyone's building an AI agent for something. So like, there's like AI engineer, there's QA engineer, there's like on-call engineer, that's AI. And then there's like AI agent that manages AI agents. So like how do you think about the workforce in general in your space and then in your own company? When you're building your own company, how do you structure like which part should be replaced by AI, which part should be like actual human being?
Yeah, I actually made a post about this that was kind of like a rage bait post, where like the clickbait header was, hey, here's how many people at Pylon we've replaced with AI. And it was a photo with a bunch of people on the
Mhm,
team with their like faces X'd out.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
And then the post continues to read, zero, we've replaced 0 people with AI. And I
mhm,
think, the thing is, like, if it were easy to replace people with AI, we would probably replace people with AI, right? Like we'd
mhm,
have to. But it's not that easy. It's actually quite difficult.
mhm,
And like, I think that right now it feels like a lot of the tasks and work that can
mhm,
be automated makes sense if you have like something super, super repetitive, like where every day you're like grinding that same task. But for example, if you automate like, hey, me searching for some like document that I have to do once a day, like that doesn't replace me. And it also like is not that valuable. Like
Mhm.
it needs like there because people the problem is people do so many things every single day as part of their job that like even
Mhm.
if you replace like one part of it, let's say 10%, you still need the whole person to do the rest.
Mhm.
So I think if you are like a very big company and you have many people doing the same type of job, so let's say even in like customer support, this is like a good example where like at massive scale, the absolute number of like one type of support question becomes very large. And so if you automate that one support question away, then like the people can focus on the more complex ones. But then you, in order to replace like a full human being's time of like, okay, they were answering that simple question, now they're not, it's you need just like absolutely massive scale to make it happen. So I
Mhm.
think like we are using AI, I think generally to move faster on a lot of things, but we have
Mhm.
not been successful slash even like really attempted to fully replace people that exist on the team because I think it would just absolutely fail. And I don't think like I can't imagine right now actually replacing anyone on the team with AI. It would just be too hard.
Mhm. I totally agree with you. I feel like especially in the early stage, there's like not much like of a repetitive task. A lot of it is like a new problem existed that day and then needed to be like get done of that day. So when you were thinking about like I guess um scaling your own companies, like so I think like I read it somewhere that you guys have like I think, like, the technical ability wasn't the most, like, thing that you guys measure. Like, when you're scaling the team, how do you think about, like, who to hire first? Like, would it be, like, 5 engineer in ML, or, like, would it be more towards, like, people who actually can navigate through, like, who are, like, very ambitious, but, like, not necessarily, like, have built everything in their resume. So like how do you kind of think about like the personality to hire first?
Um, I think it so yeah, it just probably depends on the founder's skill sets a lot, and then also
Mhm,
like what type of company or product you're building. So,
mhm,
for example, we have three co-founders, which meant that
mhm,
we could push off hiring for a bit longer. So, it was three of us all the way through YC, and then we hired our first engineer, Alex, who was someone from Samsara that Advith knew
mhm,
and had worked with. And the next like probably like three or four hires were all engineers until we then actually probably like six or seven. And then we finally hired our first product designer and first AE, so for salesperson. And then finally like a marketing person was probably like employee number 13 or something like that.
mhm,
So for us it was mostly building out a lot of product early on. That was like the bottleneck. We needed more people to do product stuff, and
mhm,
then we put ourselves as founders on the front lines to
mhm,
actually handle a lot of the customer communication. And so we just ended up, especially like I think this is important earlier stage, that founders are can like contain all of the information across the company so that you can make really good decisions on where to go and be able to pivot fast and prioritize the right things. So Advith, Robert, and I were very much on the front lines. Like for myself, more on the marketing and sales side, and then for Advith and Robert, more on the like post sales side, helping existing customers be successful, and then having this like really tight feedback loop with the engineering team to build things out.
I wonder, so like, how do you set milestone for your own company? So obviously there is like the general milestone of like, we're going to be $1 billion in 7 years or 10 years. But like when you're first setting up, like when you actually say, hey, if we're building this product on Tuesday, would you buy it? Like, would you actually, if someone say yes, like, would you actually build it by Tuesday? Or like,
Yeah.
is this like a actual, like, and then you maybe extend it to Friday? But I guess like, how do you think about like, the smallest benchmark to accomplish every week?
Yeah, it depends on the phase of the company. So earlier stage, like that question of, hey, would you buy this if for 10K on Monday, once we have it, is more of a test, to be honest, rather than like a
Mhm,
promise to deliver. You're basically just trying to understand how valuable is this product to this person. So
mhm,
it's more like when you're in the early stages of like idea exploration or you're in pivot hell, you're just
mhm,
trying to understand like okay, I think this is valuable, but I'm not really sure if it is. And so I'm like trying to understand from prospects how much they're willing to pay and how urgent this is for them. So
Mhm,
that's the purpose of that, is to answer that question. And it's definitely not a promise to build the thing by a certain day.
mhm,
Um, then as you scale, we definitely like, I think one of the advantages and one of the reasons actually we won against a lot of our competitors earlier on is because we would talk to prospects who would say like, hey, I'm evaluating you guys and someone else. And then they tell us what all their requirements are, or like what their like hesitations are. And then we'd go build them as quickly as possible. And so like we'd
mhm,
hang up the phone and be like, okay, I mean, because at that stage you have no customers, right? So maybe,
mhm,
or maybe you have 10 customers, right? And like every single customer matters at that point. And so you're
mhm,
like trying to like build momentum. And so you have to do, it's the classic like do things that don't scale, where like you get this feedback from someone and you immediately try to turn it around. And even if your product overall isn't as good as other people's,
mhm,
the prospect wants to make a bet on you because they're like, hey, this team's going somewhere, they listen to me, they're going to work with me, or maybe they don't have 100% of the features that like everyone else has, but they have the features that are more unique to me in my use case. And
yeah,
so it's, you basically iterate with that mentality. Um, and that also is like partially making sure that you're building something differentiated long term versus just trying to build like a better version of the existing thing.
mm.
So
I
for example,
yeah,
we don't have, there's a lot of functionality that like Zendesk has that we don't have, right? Or Salesforce Service
mhm,
Cloud has that we don't have. But we are so focused on the B2B use case that we we're so focused on the B2B use case that it's okay because we have a lot of things that they also don't have. And so
mhm,
whether it's like the omni-channel integrations or like AI that's very specific to B2B, or or even like integrating with your call recorders or our account management product that we have, all of these things are things that no other support platform has, even if they have other things that we don't.
for sure. So, like, focusing on, like, the right things or, like, the core structure and, like, core product offering instead of, like,
Yeah.
go for everything. So, I wonder if you are hiring, like, non-technical person today or, like, I guess, like, if, let's change the question to, like, if, let's say, since I'm a non-technical person well, I identify as non-technical, though I vibe code, but, like so I guess, like, as a non-technical person, like, if I come to you, be like, "Marty, I wanna be your co-founder on XYZ," like, what would be, like, a convincing pitch? Or, like, you feel like the person have to be full on technical to, like, actually communicate effectively and then being
Yeah.
an effective member of the, Pylon society?
Yeah, I think if someone was approaching me who is non-technical about, like, I don't think, by the way, yeah, I think it's okay to be technical or non-technical as long as like one or multiple people on the team are tech. So, like, for example, in our case of three people, if
Mhm.
I had been non-technical, I think that would have been okay.
Mhm, mhm,
But the thing is, I would have had to prove to Advith and Robert that like I was really good at sales and marketing, because that's
mhm,
really like the
mhm.
other piece of the business that someone has to tackle and the other part of the risk. So
Mhm,
you can't come and say, okay, I'm not technical and I'll do all this stuff, other stuff, but like not, if you don't really have evidence of it or it doesn't seem like you're
mhm,
going to be good at it necessarily,
mhm,
then that's kind of a weak sell. But if you
mhm,
come and you're like, hey, I came up with this idea and I have like 10 like LOIs and like people who want to buy at this amount, like that becomes the selling. That then it like feels like you're providing value,
mhm.
versus just saying like, okay, I'll handle the business side. You just like go and build the whole product. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the other problem is like, as like a non-technical person, it's like very hard to set benchmarks. So like for example, when you're trying to convince an engineer to build this product, obviously, even if you have like LOI to be like, hey, if we build this product, this feature, like it will be awesome. But like how long does the engineer actually gonna take the time to build? Because I think like that's, like, also another question, like, for, like, I guess, like, project management, like, how do you think about, like, collaborating with someone who might be, like, non-technical?
I think that wouldn't even start. You'd like think about the terms like product or project management at that
Mhm,
stage. Like
mhm,
it really does feel like I mean, yes, that exists, but I feel like you're really just more fluid than that. Like you and a technical co-founder are both going to be doing almost everything. Like you're
Mhm.
both going to be on customer calls, and it like I don't think you should like go and create a bunch of tickets for your technical co-founder. Like that seems bad, frankly. Like if your technical co-founder needs you to make tickets for them, that's a bad sign for them. They should be able to like do that themselves or like kind of have conversations with you and like actualize those into some sort of product spec or not even spec, not even written down, just like that they should just be able to like go and write the code for that, right?
Mhm.
um, and so yeah, I think that there is like, yeah, I guess maybe the high level answer is like there are many like uh, many situations that can work, of like you and a technical co-founder, but generally you're going to want yeah, basically one person just be technical, the other one just be really good at marketing and sales, and then both of you have to be fluid within the roles, and then that will make a good combo. Yeah,
Mhm. I love that. I want to be mindful of the time, so I want to
yeah.
end with like a quick 30-second fire run. Okay, what's your favorite book?
Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
I feel like maybe this is going to be a controversial one, but I feel like I'd want to talk to Trump. I feel like that would be a crazy conversation.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Um, Either my co-founders, if that counts, or Gary Lung from Airbnb, who is tech lead on my team back then.
Where can we find you outside of work?
LinkedIn or at the Pylon office, physically.
Uh, yeah, physically. We'll find you physically. But well, Marty, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's such a master class for building your own company. And you're so humble. I feel like you guys have accomplished a lot. And thank you for taking the time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Grace, thank you so much.
Let me quickly end stream.